Hello, everybody. My name is John. Welcome to Munro Live Podcast. Uh, Munro Associates is an engineering consulting firm that uses a design first approach to save our clients money. Now, how do we save our clients money? We use an entire host of tools. Some of these tools include benchmarking, teardown analysis, costing analysis, design optimization, and manufacturing optimization. Today in front of me, I have Stephen. He is the CEO of Moon 5. And Stephen, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself again by title and what you do at your company.
Okay, my name is Stephan. I'm the CEO and founder of Moon 5, and I pretty much do a little bit of everything. I'm across the sort of technical stack, but then I am also sort of lead on business as well. So really, when I say everything, I do really mean everything. And also take out the trash too. So
Yeah, you got to do that as a startup entrepreneur. You said that you started a business out of a 10 by 12 space back in the day. Can you talk us through that and to where you are today?
yeah, so I mean, technically started out of my apartment, a one bedroom apartment in Berkeley, but pretty soon after, once I started getting any sort of hardware in, I had a dog at the time, and I didn't want him to stick his nose in high voltage, and so I got a 10 by 12 room in a psychiatry building office that was within walking distance because it was the closest and cheapest thing, and I was paying for everything out of pocket, and I spent pretty much like 2 years there by myself, with a handful of people from time to time, but uh, um, pretty much driving, trying to figure out like how to upskill in certain areas, how to like understand, different code bases, how to understand, like reteach myself some electronics, reteach myself some mechanical, and like sort of iterate on the business as well.
Okay. You afford your customer base the ability to charge within a multifamily type dwelling scenario with your product line. Could you go into um, how that works for these people?
Yeah. So we are looking to, so we're specifically deploying within the multifamily home space, and our product and our services are really geared towards that. The way we do so is like we have, it's almost like a direct to customer sort of sale, right? So we're actually selling to the renter. We offer them sort of a flat rate for $0 down, and what they end up doing. And so there's kind of like two ways to go about it. The sort of preferred way is that if they are qualified to install our system there, we will have them send like a letter to their landlord, to the property owner, and say, hey, I would like to charge you. I have an EV, or like I want to get an EV, but looking at right to charge laws, it's way too expensive for me to install this right now. Right, for you, it seems really expensive too. There's a lot of like capex, a lot of opex. And you have to worry about maintenance. It's actually probably one of the primary problems with like charging in the multifamily home space is, you see the chargers down, and it's because the property owner doesn't have the, knowledge or willpower to maintain those systems sometimes. And so, we sort of paint those two options as sort of what the existing options are. And then we say, hey, there's Moon 5, right? And Moon 5 um, is for the property owner, zero capex, zero opex, no recurring fees of any type. They get revenue share through the model, and then the sort of only catch is that they have to sign and let us like have sort of exclusivity of the like cabling conduit that we're going to go in and install. But then after the contract is done, they get to keep the infrastructure. And so for them, they get this sort of like passive revenue stream that they can really sort of just get some money coming in. They don't have to worry about anything. They don't have to worry about that maintenance or any sort of the consumer problems. The consumer gets what they want. The renter, the tenant gets what they want. They get the charging. And then we get, a contract that enables us to earn our money back over time.
If I remember correctly, you indicate on your website is really just like anybody requesting and acquiring cable service. And the guys, the workers come in, they install the coax cable, they set everything up in the house. In this particular case, they give you the box. When you leave, you can take the box or they'll pick up the box. You have a similar type game plan, right? I guess you have what I think you call Ali and Orion. So Ali is the controlling aspect, and Orion is the charger itself.
So Ollie is the EVSE. It's the charger. Whereas it's actually Orion. Orion is the energy management system. So
Orion.
we
Okay.
do something. Yeah, we do something a little bit different technically from sort of our existing competitors, where rather than going off of common or house power, which is what is typically happening, which typically requires utility involvement, sort of all the sort of lengthy process to get it, an expensive process to get charging into place. We instead create a branch off of the power going to the apartment for the individual. And so part of that is kind of what enables this sort of autonomy, is that you're really only upgrading your own electrical, right? You're not necessarily impacting the entire building's electrical, but through that process, we're monitoring building power, apartment power, and then essentially when you are not overtaxing your own personal breaker, you get to dedicate charging to the actual vehicle. But given the fact that a majority of times people are not at that maximum capacity, as well as like, especially when they're sleeping, when a majority of people actually do charge, they're nowhere near that capacity. There is really sort of a lot of like capability to be able to sort of just divert the stream to the vehicle.
This sounds like a really attractive approach too. I mean, you drive around, walk around these apartment complexes, and you just don't see any capability to charge their EV vehicles. So I think what I'm hearing you say is um, Ollie, as you call it, is installed near the electrical panel, and Orion is actually what you see physically in the outside world, right?
So actually swap that around. So Orion's the one that's in the electrical room, and then the Ollie is the one that's in front of folks. Yeah.
Okay. You also advertise that this is vandal proof. How do you make it vandal proof?
Yeah. So I mean, one big thing is a majority of mechanical failures. So those happen through like the cable, right? And so the cable typically it's like there's like a pin that's bent. There's the cable is cut for the copper. You kind of can, if you drive around like LA or you drive around the Bay Area, you will more than likely see just one that's like immediately um, like one that just can't be used anymore, right? And if the charge point operator is the person that's operating that EVSE, then you have to worry about like, okay, well, is it worth repairing that station, right? Is it worth sending out a technician, an electrician to shut off power to like figure out how to actually swap that cable, right? But the reality is that Europe has kind of already solved this. So they have what's called like untethered EVSEs, and our system is as well untethered. From a design perspective, it makes it look a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about this like tangled mess of a cable. But then it also really does help from this vandalism side too. Um, Beyond that, though, we're also really sort of we tried to ask a question like what is actually needed for an EVSE, especially if it's going to be a majority of the times a dedicated EVSE. Do you really need to have complicated OLED screens? Do you need to have like other like mechanical buttons that are going to break? Like all these sort of little touch points that I think people go to as a like, oh, this is a like a easy design decision, but it's like, is this actually robust? And so we've really taken a lot of time and effort to figure out um, what needs to be robust and what doesn't need to be robust, and then also to delineate and separate between the two. So part of our system is that we separate between what we call an energy dock and the actual charger. And the energy dock contains material that is like, you'd see like the most robust outdoor, like weatherproof gear, right? It's something that doesn't need to have, it's like folded sheet metal. It's really sort of robust, like switches. And then the actual EVSC that gets put on top of it, Ollie, is sort of just mounted to that energy dock. And so that easy decoupling also enables you to easily remove the electronics without electrician involved. So if something does break, if something does get vandalized, you have the capability of repairing with actually just by the user themselves, not necessarily even with a skilled electrician.
Nice. And also, if you do move, you just extract the unit, you take it with you, or return it back to you. So this is a level 2 charger, and the kilowatt output is 7.7. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yep.
And overnight charge could get the a standard EV how many miles of range?
It's about 240.
Okay. You can't beat that. Living well, renting. Let's go back to you mentioned the right to charge. I found that interesting when I looked at your website. I never heard of that before. And when you look at the map, and we'll put that map up as an inset for this podcast, so other people can see. When you look at the map, there's not a whole lot of states that have this law passed yet. Do you know the reason why? Seems like our country would have that blanket right to charge in place across the entire lower 48.
Yeah. So it's interesting because California was the one that really sort of set this off. It actually was. There's some advocacy groups sort of really early on that wanted it to be that if you wanted to charge, that your property owner had to pay for the charging. But then all the property owners came in, they're like, no way we're going to pay for everyone's EV infrastructure, right? It I think for retrofits, it doesn't. The funny thing is that it doesn't make sense most of the times. So if you are a renter, like what you would have to do in order to make right to charge work, if you were just tackling as an individual, is you'd have to pay for all the infrastructure costs, all the charger, potentially an energy management system, if there was one on the market that would fit, exactly what you're looking to apply towards. And then you would have to, figure out how to get incentives, if incentives or rebates were available, figure that out for the first time every single time. And then your landlord could still ask you to remove it after when you move away. And so you could have an uninstall fee. So yeah, so it becomes sort of really cost prohibitive. And I think that that's fundamentally why, even though I've been in sort of the EV industry for like 3 years or so, I've actually never heard of anyone using the right to charge law. And so it's a little bit funny that it is in 14 states now. But with our strategy, we can also take advantage of that too. So if there's a large enough sort of opportunity, I kind of approach the sort of easy way of going about the installation, but there's sort of a less preferred way, which is to utilize right to charge legislation to get the renter their ability to charge, if it is like a good enough opportunity for us to be able to sort of expand within that building, right? Because we kind of have to weigh how much it's going to cost us to get into that building and how much the sort of financing is going to cost to get us to deploy at that space, versus like what the potential for additional folks like signing up within that building would be. But we could leverage that. We typically don't have that be our sort of first approach, but it does sort of enable that opportunity to sort of like, if you don't have any options, like this is kind of the legal civil code option.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So let's say I live in one of those states and I approach you. I say, hey, I'm a renter. I'd like to use your product. What's the overall lead time from the time we ink the deal to the time maybe I can start charging my EV?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really depends on, it depends on a couple of factors. So it depends on how fast your property owner responds, whether or not we're going with that right to charge legislation or not. Typically we'd want to, search for a more collaborative approach up front. And if they're on board, you're on board. It really just a matter of getting that electrician on board and getting a city permit. And that's really sort of the only requirements that are needed before we can go in and install. So, if there's an electrician that's readily available, permitting times can vary between city, of course, but it could be somewhere between like 2 weeks to a month. So it can be really quick turnaround times compared to especially sort of existing systems where you need utility permitting.
Sure. Again, this gives you the ability to park wherever it is you park in your designated slot where you live at an apartment complex whenever you want to. You're not forced to charge away from wherever you live and pay those fees. So with your system, I think you said earlier that you pay a monthly charge, whatever that rate might be. And I know it probably varies. And then on top of that, you just pay the electricity usage for what you use while you're charging the EV. I think it's a win-win, actually.
Yeah. So typically renters save anywhere from $80 to $110 per month. And that's on the coast too, right? So, and that's compared to like sort of DC fast charging capabilities, right? Which is really the only other option that you would have if you were a renter. And so the sort of fun realization that I had was that this actually scales even better in the Midwest, because people tend to drive further in the Midwest. But then even beyond that, if you would have an EV or to have a gas car, the rates, like gas is a little bit lower. The EV DC fast charging rates are pretty much the same across the entire US. And so that means the delta between how much you pay for that, kilowatt that's coming through your utility bill and how much you pay for the kilowatt from the DC fast charger is also larger too. So you're driving more miles, you're charging more, and it's going to be significantly cheaper to do so if you're charging at home.
What is your current reach? What is your current reach right now, so far as where you're based at right now? How far out have you expanded with your systems?
So we're currently only in California, Northern California at the moment, but we actually just won a $3.4 million grant through the state of California to sort of expand access throughout the state. So our goal is going to be to deploy somewhere between like 500 to I'll say somewhere around 750 units across the state of California by the end of next year in multifamily homes. So we have a pretty we're going to be scaling pretty quickly. And right now we're working on that Gen 2 product that's going to be NRTL certifiable that will enable us to really scale beyond California after this sort of large push within California is completed.
Okay, now your charger box, which is what the consumer sees outside, it's not boxy. It has a nice shape to it. Now, how did you come about that? Because it is attractive looking.
Yeah, I think we took a look at all other EVSEs that are around, and we're like, why is this so bad looking? It really felt like there was an opportunity to make something better, especially when you didn't have to have a cable. I really wanted to spend some time actually thinking about how to make something that was beautiful but also accessible too, because I think a lot of times when you create something that's more designer or design oriented, it tends to be prohibitively expensive. But it doesn't really fundamentally need to be the case, especially if you're using materials in the right way. If you're using metals and sheet metals and injection molded plastic, it really doesn't need to be that. It's sort of that design markup, but we really want to make design accessible to some degree. And so, that's the products that we're creating sort of enable that. And when I started the company, we had a really sort of boxy design in the beginning too. Right. And we were like, oh man, I was like, I don't want to maintain this design because it just doesn't look good. And so I actually reached out to sort of my network on LinkedIn. I ended up getting connected with Jan, who's now my industrial design engineer. And he's actually one of the he's the head of design at Berkeley Haas, the sort of graduate or MBA program there. And him and I just really clicked, and we've been working together ever since. And he's working on our Gen 2 product now. And he's just, it's fantastic having someone on board that really sort of believes in what we're doing, and has been actually really big champion to what we've been building towards.
Key, great synergy. That's a good story. Do your units come currently with different color options, or will they in the future?
They do. We've actually been discussing sort of the color options that they're going to be coming with right now. On our site, there's the sort of yellow version. I think there's pretty much everything but orange in the RGB color scheme, essentially. Yeah.
Now let's back up to where you're thinking about what you're going to name your company, Moon 5. I like your story on your website. Can you share that with our audience, please? Why Moon 5?
Yeah. Do you want the short story, or do you want the long story?
Entirely up to you.
Okay. Well, the short story is that it is my parents' last name's anglicized. So my mom's last name is Luna, and my dad's last name is Ng. And sort of in their respective languages, it sounds very sort of similar to Moon 5. And the slightly longer story is that my family were environmentalists since I was growing up, and it really sort of inspired me to start the company. And it just really felt like it was kind of their legacy being continued.
It's a great name for a company. Family legacy too, as well.
Yeah.
Where do you see your company going forward within the next 5 years? Do you think will you be in the Midwest?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about the sort of modern environmental movement, especially coming out of from the tech perspective, is that a lot of the the sort of best approaches tend to be ones that make the most sense economically, right? Like if you're going to be saving somewhere between around $200 a month on fuel costs by switching to an EV, it doesn't become a political issue anymore, right? It becomes an issue of like, oh, do you want an extra $200 in your pocket, right? And so like we're really aiming to make that happen. But I think beyond that, our technology has implications, not just for delivering a charge, but for enabling charges to move elsewhere. So one of the things that we're really focused on as a company is not just sort of unidirectional delivery, but bidirectionality, both in AC and in DC output, which enable features that create grid stability, that enable like local energy arbitrage, that enable energy resiliency at the local level as well. And so there's sort of all these there's a sort of ecosystem that we're creating within the multifamily home that would enable renters to have resiliency in case of a blackout or get lower energy bills. And it's all sort of being driven by having access to this really large battery at the end of the day that's just able to be driven around on wheels.
Nice. Do you have any stories from clients, happy stories that they were able to get your product and use it and share with you their feedback? Do you have anything you can
Yeah.
share like that?
I mean, honestly, the best story is no story, I think, at the end of the day. Like we've been talking, we interview our clients at the end of, pilot periods and at the end of, small deployments and stuff. And people are like, oh, it's a little bit bigger than we thought it was. It's a little bit like chunkier than we thought it would be. And we're like, okay, well, like the next generation, that's going to be completely fixed, right? And it's like, if you're getting those sort of points of feedback, it's really like, oh, like they're just able to plug in, charge, and then go, right? I think one of the first pieces of feedback that we did get, though, was someone was like excited that they would never have to go to a gas station again, that they'd never have to go to a DC fast charger again. They're just like, I think they finished the sign off with like go green, and they were just like incredibly excited that they wouldn't have to go have that sort of inconvenience of finding that third space to charge, and the inconvenience of like, is it going to be open, is it going to be working? Instead, they just have this reliable at-home service for them.
Yeah, there's nothing better than to be able to charge your EV at home, whether you rent or otherwise, and do the laundry, watch TV, anything while the vehicle's charging, sleeping. Yeah, it's a very big inconvenience a lot of times for these folks to try to find a working, reliable unit to charge their car, and hopefully be first in line to use it too.
Yeah, definitely. I think the equivalent sort of analogy that I have is like, would you rather charge your phone while you're sleeping and it's like by your bedside table, or would you rather go down to the bodega every single day and like plug in for 10 minutes and then run away with it? It's like, it's just that inconvenience, or rather the convenience of having at-home charging is really, I think, something that shouldn't be understated.
Yeah, and the range anxiety that people face, it goes away, completely evaporates. By the way, I like your analogy about it was kind of like instilled in us because everything we have has a gauge, and how was that resolved with the iPhone 13? I think you said they did away with the percentage, and I was one of those guys that said, "Well, upper right hand corner, well, how much life do I have in my battery? How come it's not telling me?" Because I'm freaked out. I've been trained to look at that, and
Yeah.
so the range anxiety goes away if you charge at home.
And I think also, so you're alluding to like this LinkedIn post that I had, I think like a week or something ago. I think that it's funny to think about, like, it is really a guessometer. And I think that, influencers I've heard call it that at the end of the day, because like there's so many variables, right? And your mapping is not really taking into account, like if you're using Apple CarPlay or whatever, it's like you're navigating, the car doesn't know where you're navigating to or what the drop in elevation is or sort of any of those features. And so like a really good example is that I took my first road trip with my EV that I just leased right before the tax credits ended, and I went all the way to like Mammoth to like visit some hot springs over the weekend with my partner, and we had to charge once on the way there. Oh my God, the Electrify America experience was not good, but that'll be a story for another time. But then on the way back, what was really incredible was we left Mammoth with 220 miles on the Ioniq 5, and it was like 360 miles from that to get back to the place. it ended up being that because we were going downhill the entire time, we arrived in the Bay Area with 80 miles left on the battery. And so it really, like if I was looking at the battery all the time, the gauge all the time, which I was, it was actually going up most of the times. And I was like, okay, well, like, it's like, okay, we went down to like 180. Oh, no, we're back to 200. Oh, no, we're going back down. And so, like, I really do think that, there is a sort of almost, there is, of course, the worry of, a lack of DC fast chargers, a lack of ports. I think that that's a fair concern. But the reality is also that California actually has more charging ports than it does gas ports right now. And so, like, you really shouldn't be concerned. And so, like, having that number, though, tick down in front of you really doesn't help with that range anxiety. And so I think that there is a combination of design from the EV side, as well as, more ports everywhere else other than California, too. That does need to happen. But I do think that range anxiety is an interesting psychological like tidbit to be thinking about.
It is definitely psychological. I did read that off your LinkedIn site maybe a week ago. It was a fresh post, actually. It was well written.
Thanks.
So I think it's important before we wrap for you to just kind of repeat what you have to offer renters out there. It's important to make sure that those that are listening, that are renters, understand what you have to offer, and just go with that and kind of give an overview of what we just discussed.
Yeah, definitely. So Moon 5 is really helping renters build additional decarbonization and electrical resiliency. And the way we're doing so is through dedicated bidirectional electric vehicle charging. What that really means to the renter is you can come to us. If you are sort of qualified for this installation opportunity, you basically just pay a small fee monthly. And then we come in, we install the infrastructure, the charging, the energy management system to your dedicated sort of electrical system. So that means, downstream of your utility meter. That means, everything that you're charging is going to get added to your utility bill. And the idea is that saves, anywhere from $80 to $110 on average for like a West Coast driver, which is going to be the sort of least beneficial case. And then beyond that, of course, we are paving the way for bidirectionality, which really is going to be a big thing, I think, moving forward, because you have these massive, massive batteries that you're just adding to the grid and to your building that can then be used for resiliency, right? Like, think about having a 100 kilowatt battery, or like even think about 100 kilowatt like generator, right? Like, imagine having that like in your basement ready to go at all times in case of blackout, right? That's what essentially we're able to provide beyond even just charging. So I think it's going to be fun, moving forward to see how sort of this develops and to see how renters really take advantage of this moving forward, I think.
Absolutely. And again, the output is somewhere around 7.7 kilowatt.
Yep.
Okay, good deal. So could you please recite your website for people? And we'll put that on the screen too later on.
Sure. Our website is moon5.tech, TECH, and it's just spelled out. So it's MOONFIVE.TECH.
I would encourage everybody to go there, especially the renters, to learn what they have to offer a little bit more in detail. And Stephan, I really appreciate having you on this particular podcast. And I will follow up with you near term to see how you're progressing. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Everybody, thank you for attending and listening to Munro Live Podcast. And you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.